You don't lose focus because the world is distracting. You lose it because your mind won't stop interfering. The real problem is not distraction, it is the constant need to control your attention. Here on Level Up 365, we're going to challenge the idea that focus is something you build through effort and break down what monks understood centuries ago that most productivity systems still miss. Most people approach focus like a system to optimize. They build routines, eliminate distractions, track habits, and still feel mentally scattered. The assumption is simple. If you manage your attention well enough, clarity will follow. But something subtle happens in that process. While you work, a part of your mind is constantly evaluating the work itself. Am I doing this right? Am I productive enough? Is this the best use of my time? This internal audit runs quietly but continuously, consuming the same mental resources you need to actually focus. So even when you remove external distractions, the internal ones remain. This is where Mushin changes everything. Mushin, often translated as no mind, does not mean an empty mind. It means a mind that is not occupied with unnecessary thought. It is a state where action happens without internal commentary, where attention is not managed, it is uninterrupted. Most productivity advice teaches you to fight distraction. Mushin reveals that the fight itself is the distraction. Think about what happens when you try to protect your focus. Every interruption becomes a threat. Every notification feels like something to resist. You enter a defensive state, constantly monitoring your environment and your own attention. And here is the irony. The anxiety of protecting your focus becomes a distraction in itself. You start spending mental energy managing your mental energy. The system turns inward and begins to generate the very problem it was meant to solve. This is why so many people feel drained after a day of trying to focus, even if they produced very little. The energy was not spent on the work, it was spent on resistance. A monk sitting in meditation took thoughts by force. That would only multiply them. Instead, thoughts are noticed and allowed to pass without reaction. No judgment, no attachment, no interruption. This same principle applies directly to work. You are writing and a thought appears. This is boring. Most people immediately engage with it. They either resist it or follow it. Both paths break focus. In Mushin, the thought is acknowledged and released without friction. The work continues. Focus is not broken by distraction, it is broken by engagement with distraction. This leads to a deeper realization. The mind is not something you can control directly, it is something you can stop interfering with. Trying to control your thoughts is like trying to smooth water with your hands. The more you interfere, the more disturbed it becomes. Instead, Mushin operates on a different principle. Remove interference, and clarity emerges naturally. This is why high performers often describe their best work as effortless. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists lose track of time. Writers produce pages without feeling the strain. They are not forcing focus, they are experiencing the absence of resistance. The mistake is thinking that this state comes after discipline. In reality, it comes from the right relationship with your own mind. Here is where the contrast becomes clear. Most people believe discipline means pushing through resistance. They sit down and force themselves to work despite distraction. This builds endurance, but it also reinforces internal conflict. Every session becomes a battle. But the truth is, the highest level of discipline removes the battle entirely. A monk practicing archery does not think about hitting the target. They do not analyze every movement. They train until the action becomes natural, and then they release without hesitation. The arrow is not forced toward the target, it arrives there. This is not mystical, it is neurological. When the brain is overloaded with self-referential thinking, performance drops. Every additional layer of thought adds friction. Mushin reduces cognitive load by eliminating unnecessary processing. No commentary, no judgment, no hesitation. Now consider a simple example. Two people are preparing for an important presentation. The first one rehearses obsessively, constantly thinking about how they might fail, how others will judge them, how they need to perform perfectly. Their mind is full before they even begin. The second person prepares, then lets go. When the moment comes, they speak directly, responding in real time without overthinking. They are present, not trapped in their own head. The difference is not skill, it is mental interference. This is why many productivity systems fail over time, They add layers of complexity instead of removing friction. More rules, more tracking, more pressure. Eventually, the system becomes heavier than the work itself. Mushin simplifies everything, not by removing structure, but by removing attachment to structure. You still plan, but you don't cling to the plan. You still work, but you don't obsess over the outcome. You still aim to improve, but you don't judge every step. This creates a different kind of consistency, one that is not dependent on motivation or mood, because there is no internal argument to resolve. Now the question becomes practical. How do you apply this? First, stop trying to eliminate distractions completely. That goal is unrealistic and creates frustration. Instead, train your response to distraction. When it appears, notice it and return without emotion. Second, reduce unnecessary input before deep work, not because input is bad, but because it fills the mind with noise. Silence creates space, and space allows focus to emerge. Third, focus on starting without resistance. The first few minutes of any task determine everything. If you begin with hesitation, the entire session carries that weight. Begin immediately, without negotiation. Fourth, detach from outcomes during the process. When you focus on results, you introduce pressure. When you focus on action, you maintain clarity. Finally, practice being fully present in small tasks, washing dishes, walking, eating. These moments train your ability to stay with one thing without drifting. Mushin is not built in high-pressure situations, it is built in ordinary ones. Over time, this changes how you experience work entirely. You stop chasing focus and start creating the conditions where it naturally appears. You stop fighting your mind and start understanding it. You stop relying on motivation and start operating from clarity. And that's the real shift. Because the goal is not to become someone who can focus harder. The goal is to become someone who no longer needs to force focus at all. So the next time you sit down to work, don't ask how you can concentrate more. Ask yourself something simpler. What am I adding right now that doesn't need to be there?